Hi, I'm Kurt Fernley and welcome to 1+1. Judith Lucy is a cultural icon. She has graced our screens and stage for over 30 years. Judith is somebody that we feel we all know, but I think she may still have a few surprises left up her sleeve.
Ladies and gentlemen, Judith Lucy.
Please welcome Judith Lucy! Please welcome Judith Lucy.
Judith Lucy, horse whisperer.
It's so good to be out!
Doesn't that look relaxing?
Harder. There we go.
Judith Lucy, welcome to 1+1.
Hello, Kurt. It is a delight to be here.
Do you get nervous being on TV?
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, let's just go to a bar and forget this whole ridiculous nonsense.
I was actually nervous because your ability to draw on life and to make it funny, to use all parts of life in your comedy, I thought, what am I going to give you to be fodder for the next, incredible piece of art that's put out there?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Kurt. And it's the only reason I've agreed to do this. I thought, how can I exploit this? No, like we were talking before off air about being anxious, and I'm anxious almost all the time. Like, I don't get as anxious doing this as, say, I would if I were walking on this stage to, tell some gags to strangers. But no, I think, well, like a lot of people probably, but there's just a low-level stress there just about constantly. But thank you for saying that I take the turd sandwich that is often my life and try to make it into something amusing. That's what really I've spent the last 34 years doing.
Is there anything that you leave, that you won't see as potentially funny?
Not in terms of my life, there isn't. I mean, I think I'm only a bit, and I've gotten better at this. I try to be very conscientious about putting other people in the shit, unless they've been a complete arsehole to me, and then, well, what are you going to do? But yeah, I think, I've talked about death and adoption and heartache and, look, the bottom line is, Kurt, there is no part of my life I won't exploit for cash. That's really it in a nutshell.
What about comedy in general? Is there anything that you think is off limits for comedians?
Oh, look, I guess I feel like it absolutely depends how a topic is handled and who is handling it. Like, in theory, I think you should be allowed to, or you should be able to talk about pretty much most things if it's done in a smart, sensitive way that is not offending anyone, I mean, one of the questions I get asked a lot these days is, political correctness, hasn't that gone too far? Must make comedy really difficult? No, just don't be an arsehole. It's really straightforward. How about you're not, offensive to people? That's what political correctness has always meant to me anyway.
Is it a bit dangerous though? Like, I know not right now, but isn't it always a bit dangerous when you come out and you've got to make, your job is to make a crowd feel and laugh and say things maybe that they wouldn't see themselves saying?
But life is dangerous, Kurt, wherever you turn. I sort of mean that, though. I mean, you never know when you're going to offend someone. Like in a conversation, if you're putting any kind of art out there, then you never know. And it's quite often like I've written a couple of books now, and I try to be so careful about what I put in stuff like that. And the stuff that you have just, woken up at 4 a.m. going, oh my God, what will my grandmother think of that? They won't give a shit about. And the thing you have given absolutely no thought to, like maybe mentioning my grade 3 teacher wore a denim skirt, it's like you'll get a phone call or an email saying, how dare you? So I feel like all you can do is kind of go in there with the best of intentions and try not to be an arsehole and do a lot of this.
How do you manage the anxiety when
Alcohol, Kurt. Alcohol.
How do you manage in the moment, though, that you take to the stage and the lights turn on? And, so I was anxious in every single race that I did, but then you get that white line fever. Although saying it, and not the creative arts white line fever might be a little different than the wheelchair racing white line fever, but you get that moment where the lights turn on, the gun goes, and then you're away.
Yeah.
How did you manage that process when you were about to take to the stage?
Before I answer that, is it like, because I heard Kathy Freeman talk about this once and I was just so fascinated by it, because she said it was like suddenly everything went silent. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, after everything being so hectic, as soon as that, as you say, that the whistle or the gun or whatever it is, and is that what it was like for you? Was it just...
So in the lead up to it, I remember one of the very first times that I took to the stage, there was 118,000 people.
Wow.
It was in the Sydney Paralympic Games, and I remember being so nervous and nauseous, and I was throwing up in the cooler room trying to hide it from my competitors. So I was spitting in a bin, and then my arms were shaking so much as they announced me that I struggled to even put my hand on the push rim, and then the gun goes and everything stops.
Wow.
There's no anxiety. There's no nervousness. It's like you're made to be there.
Are you aware of thinking anything?
It's all the process after that.
Yeah.
It's all what I need to do, and then I take that first step, second, third, and then it becomes back to instinct, and you're rolling with the adrenaline and the history that's brought you to there as well, the training that's brought you to there. Do you get that?
Hang on a minute. I will... back to me in a minute. But and then when does it end? When you cross the finish line, is it like you're waking up from a dream?
Depends on what the finish line is. So you're building the momentum, and everything's happening so quickly, and you're choosing. And if it goes right, it's like you're waking up from the reality, because you've told yourself so many times about what that race will look like in your brain. And then when you cross the finish line, if it looks like you've prepared, it's normal. If it looks like something that you weren't prepared for, like if you crashed or if you came dead last, then it's like what's happened? You're surprised.
Does it take a few minutes to for the adrenaline to stop pumping through you?
A few decades.
Yeah. Well, that I get. I can kind of relate to a lot of what you're saying, except, not 118,000 people and people essentially caring a lot less about what I'm doing. But I would say I get very nervous before I go on stage, but I guess my equivalent of the gun going is that an amazing thing happens when you leave the backstage and you walk to the microphone, and it's only a couple of metres, but some sort of weird transformation goes on in that couple of metres. It's like I stop being the Judith that, has had the tracky dacks on at home watching telly not that long before that, and suddenly I turn into the Judith that hopefully can hold an audience's attention. And that's when the anxiety goes. It's like by the time I have my hand on the microphone, I'm switched on. And when you get that first laugh, then I guess that's the equivalent of you're off, And then you just don't have a chance to not think. Like even if something gets a big laugh, you're immediately thinking of the next line you've got to deliver. And then you walk off stage and it's like, wow, what happened? But hopefully it was a good thing. And I do always enjoy that first glass of wine.
Do you process it straight away?
I'm a lot better than I used to be. I used to be one of those people that would get off stage and just beat myself up over, you blew that syllable, that line should have been different. But now I'm a lot better at unless something's a complete disaster, I'm a lot better at going, you know what? you gave that your best shot, and now just have a wine and shut up. And that's the other thing. That is one of the things about doing stand-up. And I suppose it's probably the same if you're an actor too, maybe delivering a monologue. But by the time you walk off stage, like, I do not want to talk. I am so sick of the sound of my own voice. It's just, and I know a lot of people don't like my voice, but you know what? I am the captain of that club of not liking my own voice. So yeah, that all I want to do is have a drink and stare off into the middle distance.
I told you, I find your voice now extremely calming and soothing.
You are really the Lone Ranger there, but God bless you, Kurt. Thank you.
How would you deal with praise at that point?
Don't hear it.
Really?
Yeah.
The fan that comes up and says, you are amazing.
It's not, and I'm sure I'm not the Lone Ranger here by any stretch of the imagination. I think I actually do, and I guess that's why I asked you how long it takes for the adrenaline to stop pumping through you, because I don't think I take much in for a while. I think it's just like you need to settle, really. But all performers, and let's face it, most people, you don't take in compliments the way you take in criticism.
No, you don't. Your eye is drawn to the critical kind of word or the critical voice.
Absolutely.
1,000 times more.
And apparently that's how we're built. Like someone, I interviewed someone once, wonderful guy, Tane Hunter, and he was saying, our brains are like Teflon when it comes to praise and Velcro when it comes to criticism. So I can tell you bad reviews word for word that are 30 years old. And since you asked, yes, there was a review in Adelaide that I'll never forget, and it was myself and the wonderful Alan Davies, who didn't go on to do well at all. Some people, I'm sure, will know him from QI and Jonathan Creek, but at that stage, you know, he was nowhere near as famous as he is now. Anyway, we're both supports for Jamoan. And Jamoan got a good review, and then it said, it's burned into my brain. It will never leave me. And as for Jamoan's supports, they were just simply awful. So that's not a line you forget in a hurry, Kurt.
No, that's the one that captures your eye. And I think it is, the negative feedback is like it's like our instinctual look towards fear, because that'll keep us alive.
Yes, yes.
Regardless of that terribly inaccurate feedback.
Crazily inaccurate.
Did you always know that you were funny?
Oh, boy. I mean, I think I am fascinated with the whole nature-nurture thing, especially because I'm adopted. And so I often think, where did I get that from? Mind you, I think everyone does that anyway. But with humour, I think it's a really interesting thing, because I don't know if you're born funny or if humour is just such a great defence mechanism. And so I think because I had very unusual parents, I think I kind of realised, not consciously, but from a pretty early age, that, you know, if I didn't crack a few gags at school, you would have been looking at the friendless, smelly girl in the corner who, you know, I didn't have a shower until I was 15. You know, Mum hardly ever washed my hair, used a lot of dry shampoo, which just meant I looked like a Lamington. Anyway, I'm going into ridiculous detail here, but I think I discovered being funny pretty early on because I had to, really. And, you know, it's that really dreadfully boring comedians were all sad clowns, you know. But I think a lot of funny people probably were funny from when they were kids. So I guess that's a very long answer. I think I did always rely on being funny. So I guess on some level I knew I could do it.
And how do you make that leap, though, from defence of being funny? And we've all used that. Like, how do you, if you're the kid that stands out, you know, like...
Not that you would know a thing about that, Kurt.
Not at all.
But it's good the way you can put yourself in someone else's shoes there.
I'm just grateful there was a ramp to this day. But you took a leap to be a comedian, you know, like how do you work the courage up to make that step?
Is it courage? Is it just stupidity? I'm not too sure.
No, it's courage.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things that, don't we all do stuff when we're like teenagers and in our early 20s where you think, you look back and go, oh my God, if I'd known anything about anything, I would never have done that. So it was just kind of naivety and like a lot of comedians my age, I mean, I didn't grow up wanting to be a comedian because that was not exactly a career option when I was, you know, a teenager. I wanted to be an actor. And so when that didn't really pan out, I thought, but I'm still a wanker and I still want to perform. So what can I do? And by that stage, I'd moved from Perth to Melbourne and I was seeing a lot of stand-up, and I was also really attracted to the idea that stand-ups could obviously, or comedians full stop, could make their own work. And that was the one thing I didn't like about acting, that whole idea of waiting for the phone to ring and having to audition, whereas I was attracted to this idea that, oh my God, you can just write some stuff and stand up on a stage with a microphone and people will pay to see you. I thought it was worth trying, but I was terrible for a mighty long time.
Was it a particularly challenging environment for women?
Oh, yes. Yes, it was, Kurt. And oh, boy. Because, I mean, you know, I've been doing it for 34 years now. And so when I first started, it's one of the things I love about comedy now is how much more diverse it is. Because when I started, it was just straight white men, really, wall to wall. You were often, the only woman on the bill. And, you know, often you would be going on after 6 men had talked about bongs and their penis. And then you would come out and talk about something that would be quite different. And also back then you were fighting the idea that was kind of pretty pervasive that women just weren't funny. So you were, it was tough.
How do you describe your comedy? There's punching up, there's punching down, but you use so much of yourself in there.
I just punch sideways. I just punch myself in the face. I guess, I mean, the first kind of show I did that was really, I guess, a success and that I toured it nationally was a show called King of the Road. And that's when I talked about finding out I was adopted and then going on this disastrous trip overseas.
All my friends have reacted in exactly the same way, especially the ones that know my family really well. They've all gone, oh my God, you're adopted. You must be so relieved.
And that was when I kind of went, oh, this is my jam. This is what I need to do. I just need to bore people senseless by talking about myself. And that's when I kind of, worked out that actually when you do reveal things about yourself, I think that's when you appeal to people, because I think people kind of are sitting in the audience either going, oh man, that has happened to me, or thank God that hasn't happened to me. So people either go, oh, I can relate to Judith, or thank Christ I'm not Judith.
I actually said to Mum, why didn't you tell me I was adopted? And she said, I forgot. Which wasn't really the answer I was chasing.
The first time you took that very real, potentially traumatic moment in your life and you turned it into comedy and you were so open about it, how hard was that?
I mean, in a weird way, I mean, you sort of referred to this earlier, like we kind of all do it. And I think Australians have a pretty great sense of humour. And I think we're very used to turning our lemons into lemonade. You know, it's like people crack jokes at a wake. I mean, I think that's how we deal with terrible stuff. It's like a knee-jerk reaction is to take a terrible thing that's happened to you, and when you're telling your friends about it, you find the humour in it. So I suppose, and I mean, some of, I suppose, the most dramatic things I've talked about on stage, you know, have started off with me having a few drinks and telling those stories to a friend. And then, you know, you turn that friend into a room full of strangers who pay you money.
London was the place where I was getting out of a cab and the taxi driver turned to me and said, you know, out of all the tourists we get in England, I hate Australians the most. I thought, thanks for sharing. I actually don't...
You were going through a difficult period of time a few years ago when you created the podcast, Overwhelmed and Dying. What was happening?
Look, a whole bunch of crap happened, really. And, you know, it was a bit of a perfect storm in that, I mean, the first and no question the worst thing that happened was my brother died of lung cancer. And around about that same period, it was like, hello, midlife crisis. I woke up and because of everything that had gone on with my brother, I became menopausal overnight. Unsurprisingly, as a woman approaching 50, the phone wasn't ringing as much. I had a dry vagina, Kurt. I was dealing with that. And then, the one part of my life that felt like it was going okay was I was in a relationship. And it was a fantastic relationship with a man that I was absolutely convinced that I was going to grow old with. And then, annoyingly, I discovered that he'd actually been stealing out of one of my bank accounts for over 2 years. And that was... I've never been so blindsided in my entire life. And, it had some pretty stiff competition. Finding out I was adopted on Christmas Day was a little surprising as well. But no, so it did just feel like life went just totally to shit. And I guess because I've been doing this job for a long time, I'm really used to, and I think it's a very good skill, I'm used to writing things down, and I do find that that's a good way to process things, as is drinking too much and going to a therapist. I like to do a bit of all of them.
Or pushing a marathon.
There you go. See, we've all got our techniques. And as usual, I know there is nothing remotely original about me, Kurt, and so it's kind of like, well, you know what? I reckon if this stuff has happened to me, midlife, someone in my family dying, a terrible breakup. Of course, all of that stuff has happened to a million other people. So let's do a podcast series about it. And, and I love doing that stuff because I love doing this. Like, I love interviewing people and hearing how they deal with their crap. So it was kind of that ridiculous idea that I interviewed all of these people, and the premise was it being about my life, but, I wound up learning so much and getting so much from that process.
What did you learn?
What did I learn? Oh, golly. It was just... Overwhelmed and Dying was a fantastic podcast because I got to talk to everyone from a wonderful woman called Rebecca McCabe, who was a woman who's roughly my age. She had just left the convent. Imagine that. Imagine stopping being a nun after 25 years. We talked to Stephen Oliver, who's incredible. The whole thing ended with me snorkeling at Ningaloo Reef with a humpback whale with the author Tim Winton holding my hand. And I do actually remember having a moment, because I can't really swim either, Kurt, so I hadn't really thought it through. But I remember having that incredible experience, and I'm obsessed with Tim Winton. It was, a dream come true to be able to hang out with him. And I remember thinking, you know what? If I die around about now, not a bad result. So it was, and I suppose that's why I find life endlessly fascinating, because I made this podcast as a result of all this crap that had happened, and it resulted in me having possibly one of the best days of my entire life. So you just never know, do you?
Well, I found it really... I know Overwhelmed and Dying may have pitched to a less than optimistic audience, but I found it really optimistic.
Oh, thank you.
Are you an optimist?
I think I kind of am, actually. And I guess if you're a comedian, it doesn't really come with the territory. I guess people sort of presume that you're cynical or a bit of a pessimist. But no, I think, I really believe people are fundamentally good. And I really believe, even though, as we speak, the world is going to hell in a handbasket, I still have optimism. And I also think that even if that's delusional, it gets you out of bed in the morning. So that's a plus.
I listened to an interview that is 17 years ago.
Good Lord.
16.
A lot of red wine under the bridge since then, Kurt.
You were asked what you're like when you're happy. And you said that I'm exactly like what I am when I'm sad, but without the crying.
Yes, I remember that.
Is that still the case?
I think I'm probably a little better at happiness these days. I think it's not just a case that when I'm happy I'm just not weeping. I think I've managed to discern some greater differences there. I think Oh boy, if you got to do a bit of work on yourself, don't you? I mean, so I've certainly tried to do that over the years, and I think it would also be really disappointing if our ideas about happiness didn't change. Like if I thought what would make me, my ideas of what would make me happy at 20 are not how I view life now. And I guess I'm a big fan of hopefully you get a bit wiser as you get older. And so I think my ideas of happiness now are far less rooted in things that are beyond my control, for example. Like, I think I tied so much of my ideas about happiness and even identity with my work. And work is still incredibly important to me. But I now kind of realise that actually maybe it's about stuff like the people in your life and love and purpose and doing stuff for other people as a performer. Who knew? Who knew I'd ever think that? But I mean, what do you think? Do you look back at how you were in your 20s and think, wow, I mean, what makes you happy now? Is that different?
Oh, completely different. But I am very, very grateful that I didn't do long-form interviews in my 20s.
They're not easy to do.
No, they're not easy to do. And also to be reflective at that point in time. It just, I think you need to go through a period of reflection before you can find, within the mess, what is it that made me happy?
Yeah.
And how do I recreate it or find a pathway back to that or see it into the future? Where do we see Judith Lucy in the next 10 years?
It's a really good question, and I'm excited to say, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I don't know that I'm going to be doing as much stand-up, to be honest. I think I'll always write and perform, essentially because I have no other skills and nothing to fall back on. So I think I will be compelled to stay in that area. But I reckon you're going to hear me banging on about climate change some more. I've been talking about it for ages, but I actually think I might just bite the bullet and become a marriage celebrant. And what the hell, I'll do funerals as well. I'm a middle-aged female performer. Of course I'm going to become a marriage celebrant. That's what we all ultimately do. I don't know. I mean, I'll be around, Kurt. I'll see you around. I'll see you at the bar.
Well, Judith Lucy, thank you for your time and thank you for joining me on 1+1.
Oh, Kurt, it's been a delight. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on a loop, but I'm just going to cut my voice out and listen to you.
You poor bugger.